A giant's club splits a gate that has held for 1,000 years in a single swing. 90,000 people who have spent their whole lives running from the cold are about to become the deadliest army the Seven Kingdoms have ever seen. And behind them, the wall that has held back the end of the world for 8,000 years now stands wide open, with nothing left on the other side to stop what is coming. The night is dark and full of theories. What if Robb Stark allied with the Wildlings before the War of the Five Kings could even begin? Let's explore the absolute depths of this dark, aggressive, and completely rewritten history of Westeros in our video today. The iron bells of Winterfell do not ring for victory. They toll for a dead father. Snow falls in thick, silent sheets, blanketing the gray stone walls, the frozen battlements, and the weeping branches of the ancient heart tree. In the center of the great keep, 18-year-old Robb Stark stands motionless, his gray eyes staring at the wet, ink-smeared parchment in his hands. The wax seal of the royal crown is broken, trampled into the freezing mud at his feet. His father, Eddard Stark, is dead, beheaded on the steps of the great sept of Baelor. It was Joffrey Baratheon's own voice that gave the order, against the counsel of wiser men, and it is Joffrey's name that Robb will carry north into the dark and south into the fire. Robb's knuckles turn white as he crumples the letter. Around him, the great lords of the north, Great Jon Umber, Rickard Karstark, and Roose Bolton, mutter of war, demanding they march south to lock swords with Casterly Rock. They shout for vengeance, their voices echoing off the timber rafters of the Great Hall, calling for Lannister blood to wash away the stain of their lord's execution. But Robb sees the cold, structural truth that his bannermen ignore. The southern lords will not help him. The Riverlands are already burning under Sir Gregor Clegane's raiders. The Vale is silent behind its mountain walls, and Renly Baratheon is playing at kingship in the fertile fields of the Reach, raising an army of 70,000 flowers that will never march north to face the winter. If Robb marches south with his 14,000 northern spears, he marches into a golden trap. His sisters, Sansa and Arya, remain hostages of the crown in King's Landing, and his people will bleed to death along the banks of the Trident, while Tywin Lannister sits securely behind his gold vaults. Robb realizes that honor is a leash the South uses to keep the wolves in chains. He takes a deep breath of the freezing air, his mind clearing of the boyish dreams of glory, replaced by a cold, surgical pragmatism. The quiet wolf is dead. In his place stands a predator who is ready to tear down the very rules of the game. He turns his back on the southern maps, his gaze drifting far to the north, where the icy shadow of the wall cuts the sky. The old gods have always been silent, but the trees remember, and far beyond those trees lies an army of 90,000 forgotten souls, warriors and spearwives, elders and children, thralls and giants and mammoths, people who have spent 1,000 years fighting the only enemy that has ever truly mattered. Robb does not yet understand what it will cost the realm of men to empty that army out from behind the only wall that has ever held it back. Robb Stark says to Great Jon Umber with a voice like cracking ice, "The South wants a war of knights and banners. They expect us to play their game of honor, to kneel before their paper laws while they mount our father's head on a spike. But honor did not save my father, and it will not bring my sisters home. We do not look south for allies. We look beyond the wall." Great Jon Umber says to Robb Stark, his massive frame shaking with a mixture of shock and dawning fury, "Beyond the wall? You speak of the free folk, your grace. They are raiders who have stolen our sheep, burned our holdfasts, and raided our people for thousands of years. You cannot mean to let them cross the wall. The North will never accept them." Robb Stark says to Great Jon Umber, his hand tightening around the pommel of his steel sword, "The North will accept survival, Great Jon. If we march south alone, the Lannisters will bleed us in inches. Tywin has the gold of the West and the swords of the South. But if I open the wall, I will bring an army that has never known the fear of a gilded shield. I mean to do exactly that. If the Lannisters want a war of monsters, I will give them 90,000 of them." Roose Bolton says to Robb Stark, his pale eyes glittering in the shadows of the hall, "The Crannogmen report that the King's Road is clear, your grace, but the Watch is bound by ancient oaths. They will not allow Mance Rayder's host to pass through the gates without a fight. If we force our way, we will be fighting our own brothers in black." Robb Stark says to Roose Bolton with a cold, hollow smirk, The watch is undermanned and starving, Lord Bolton. They have only 300 men at Castle Black. They will not fight us. They will thank us for saving them from the dead. Prepare the horses. We ride north before the dawn. The decision is made, and the news spreads through the Winterfell courtyard like a freezing wind. Before he rides, Robb names old Sir Roderick Cassel, Castellan of Winterfell, leaving him a skeleton garrison and the care of his younger brothers, Bran and Rickon, and of Maester Luwin's council. The northern soldiers, who had spent weeks sharpening their swords for a march south, now look toward the icy horizon with unease. But the young wolf does not hesitate. He has shed his father's honor, and his teeth are now made of obsidian and ice. The wind off the wall screams like a dying giant, carrying the bitter scent of pine and frozen earth. Robb Stark rides through the colossal wooden gates of Castle Black, his direwolf Greywind pacing silently beside his mount, his silver fur covered in frost. Behind them rides a lean, hardened vanguard of 3,000 northern veterans, their gray cloaks stiff with ice. They do not find the disciplined Black Brothers of legend. They find a ruined, half-manned fortress of shivering old men and green boys, terrified of the massive, dark mass of humanity gathering in the haunted forest beyond the ice. Jon Snow stands in the courtyard, his dark eyes wide with disbelief as his brother dismounts. Jon Snow says to Robb Stark with a quiet, breathless gasp, "Robb, they are calling you the King in the North. But why are you here? The Watch is bound by oaths. We cannot join your war against the Lannisters. We are the shields that guard the realms of men." Robb Stark says to Jon Snow, his face hardened by the cold wind, his fingers resting on the hilt of his sword, "I am not asking the Watch to break their vows, Jon. I am here to relieve them of their burden. The real enemy is not south of the wall. It is what walks in the dark beyond the trees. I need Mance Rayder, and I need him now. Open the gate." Inside the cold stone chambers of the Lord Commander's tower, Jeor Mormont's chair standing empty since the old bear died of the winter fever 2 moons past, with too few brothers left to bother electing another, the king beyond the wall sits beneath a flickering torch, his tattered red and black cloak draped over his shoulders, his weathered face showing no fear. Beside him stands Tormund Giantsbane, his red beard frosted with snow, his blue eyes watching the young Stark king with a dangerous, feral amusement. Mance Rayder says to Robb Stark, a faint, mocking smile on his weathered face, "The Lord of Winterfell comes to the wall. Tell me, boy, did you ride all this way just to tell us to freeze in silence? Or did your southern lords finally show you what a real enemy looks like? We have 90,000 people behind us, and they are not looking to bend the knee to a green boy." Robb Stark says to Mance Rayder, his gray eyes calm and terrifyingly empty of fear, "I'm not here to ask you to kneel, Mance. I know why your people are gathering in the Frostfangs. I know what walks in the dark beyond the trees, and I know that the wall will not protect you when the cold tide rises. I will open the gates of Castle Black. I will give your 90,000 people the gift and the new gift to settle, with fertile land to farm and northern timber to build their homes. They will live under the protection of House Stark, free men who kneel to no one." Tormund Giantsbane says to Robb Stark, letting out a loud, roaring laugh that rattles the stone walls, "Free men who don't kneel? A Stark lord offering us the gift? What is the catch, little wolf? Starks do not give away their lands for free. Your ancestors have hunted us like beasts for 8,000 years." Robb Stark says to Tormund Giantsbane, his voice dropping to a low, razor-sharp whisper, "The catch is simple. Your 90,000 people must march south with me. Your warriors, your spearwives, your skin changers, your giants, and your mammoths. We will march through the riverlands. We will cross the Trident, and we will tear the golden lie off the Iron Throne. You will help me pull the Lannisters from their gilded chairs, and in return, you will have a home where your children will never have to run from the dead again." Mance Rayder says to Robb Stark, his fingers tracing the ancient carvings of his bone-handled knife, "My people do not follow titles, Robb. They will not fight for a king who sits in a warm castle. They follow deeds. If we go south, we will face heavy steel, armored horses, and walls of stone. Many of us will die." Robb Stark says to Mance Rayder, "Many of you are already dying here. If you stay, you become soldiers for the Night King. If you march with me, you die as free men, fighting for a future. The gates are open, Mance. Choose now." Mance Rayder looks at Tormund, seeing the dawning, savage respect in the giant's eyes. He slowly raises his hand, his fingers clenching Robb's forearm in a silent, blood-bound agreement. Mance Rayder says to Robb Stark with grim finality, "The Wildlings do not kneel, Stark, but we know how to hunt. Let us show the South how a wolf hunts when he runs with the wild." Neither man says aloud what both of them already know. When this host marches south, the wall behind it will hold nothing but 300 old men, a handful of ravens, and 8,000 years of silence. Robb Stark is about to win his war by opening the one door in the world that was never meant to be opened both ways. That night, in the frozen yard of Castle Black, Jon Snow stands alone before the weirwood stump that serves this godless fortress for a heart tree, his black cloak heavy with frost on his shoulders. He had felt this same pull once before, in the first days after the news of his father's death reached the wall, the same black temptation to ride south and put a sword through every Lannister who had ever smiled at his father's murder. Back then, it had been Sam and Pip and Gren who talked him out of it in the dark of the common hall, reminding him of the words he had spoken before the old gods, holding him to a vow he had almost broken out of grief alone. There is no one left in this yard tonight to hold him to anything. The watch that could have stopped him has 300 starving men and no way to stop 90,000 free folk from walking straight through its gate, let alone one bastard who has already decided to walk beside them. He unclasps the black cloak, and it falls into the snow like a shed skin. Jon Snow says to the empty dark, his voice barely a whisper, "I said the words. I meant them when I said them. But the men who would have held me to them are ash in a southern sept alongside my father, and I am done being a shield for a realm that let Ned Stark's head roll for the crime of telling the truth. Forgive me, Father. I am not the shield tonight. I am the wolf." He does not look back at the cloak in the snow. He mounts his horse and rides to catch his brother's column, an oathbreaker now by the letter of every law the Watch has ever kept, and no man left alive at Castle Black with the strength to call him one to his face. The King's Road is no longer a path for merchants and travelers. It is a river of furs, bronze, and bone. 90,000 free folk pour through the colossal archway of Castle Black, an endless chaotic column that stretches from the frozen horizon to the edge of the Wolfswood. Among them march the Thens, their bronze scales gleaming in the pale winter sun, the Hornfoots, their bare feet hardened by the ice, the Cave Dwellers, their faces painted with white ash, and the Spearwives, their quivers filled with obsidian-tipped arrows. But only a fraction of that river is steel. The true fighting strength, perhaps 20,000 warriors, a dozen giants, and 3 war-trained mammoths, rides at the vanguard, while the slower tide of elders, children, and thralls follows in their wake, spreading out across the gift to begin the long, unfamiliar work of building homes instead of fleeing them. But the true terror walks at the very front. 12 giants 10 feet tall and wreathed in thick mammoth fur lumber through the snow, their massive hands clenching clubs carved from the trunks of ancient weirwood trees. Beside them pace 3 woolly mammoths, their curved, iron-hard tusks decorated with northern steel plates and heavy leather harness. The ground trembles beneath their rhythmic, heavy footsteps, a sound that sends every crow for leagues around fleeing into the gray sky. In the courtyard of Winterfell, Catelyn Stark stands on the high wooden battlements, her face pale as death, as she watches the wild tide fill the winter town below. The smell of unwashed fur, wet earth, and the wild, musky scent of mammoths drifts over the stone walls. Beside her, Lord Rickard Karstark stands in silence, his eyes fixed on the giants below. Rickard Karstark says to Catelyn Stark with a bitter, spitting curse, "Look at them, my lady. Savages in our courtyard. Savages under our gates. Your son has invited the very monsters we fought to keep out. If Ned were alive, he would have hanged Mance Rayder from the highest tower of Winterfell." Catelyn Stark says to Rickard Karstark, her hands clutching her woolen cloak to keep her body from shaking, "My husband is dead, Lord Rickard, and the South is what killed him. If Robb must lead monsters to save his sisters, then let the South face the fury of the wild." Robb Stark stands at the center of the Great Hall, reviewing maps of the Riverlands with Mance Rayder and Roose Bolton. The traditional northern lords sit at the far end of the hall, their hands resting on the pommels of their swords, their eyes never leaving the king beyond the wall. Roose Bolton says to Robb Stark, his soft, pale-eyed voice carrying a quiet, unsettling approval. The Lannisters are prepared for a standard northern invasion, Your Grace. Tywin Lannister has established his center at Harrenhal, his heavy cavalry under Sir Jaime guarding the Red Fork. He expects us to march through the neck and offer him a classic field battle. He does not know that our vanguard does not ride horses, but mammoths. Mance Rayder says to Roose Bolton, a quiet smirk on his face, "Your knights are soft, Lord Bolton. They rely on their shining plate and their orderly lines. They have never faced a skin changer who can see their movements through the eyes of a hawk, or a giant who can crush a horse and rider with a single swing of a pine trunk. We will not offer them a battle. We will offer them a hunt." Robb Stark says to Mance Rayder, his gray eyes cold and unyielding, "We march on the Riverlands." The Freys hold the crossing at the Twins. If Walder Frey refuses to open his gates, we will not negotiate. We will let the giants tear his towers down. The crossing must be ours. The Army of the North marches south, a terrifying fusion of disciplined steel and primal savagery. As they cross the neck, the swampy bogs of the Crannogman open to receive them. Howland Reed's swamp fighters join the column, their poisoned arrows silent and deadly, acting as scouts for the massive, howling host of the Free Folk. The twin towers of the Twins stand gray and imposing over the rushing waters of the Green Fork. Lord Walder Frey stands on the high battlements of his bridge, his ancient, wrinkled face twisted in a mixture of stubborn pride and sudden, cold terror as he looks upon the monstrous host gathering on the northern bank. The snow has turned to a freezing rain, washing the red mud of the Riverlands into the dark water below. Beside the great wooden gates of the northern tower, 3 giants stand in the pouring rain, their skin-clad chests glistening with water, their massive hands dragging 2 whole tree trunks to serve as battering rams. Beside them, Tormund Giantsbane sits atop a shaggy northern garron, his bone-handled axe resting on his shoulder. Walder Frey says to his captains with a high-pitched, trembling screech, "What are those things? Where are the Stark banners? The boy king was supposed to come here with knights and ladies, begging for my bridge. He brings wildlings and monsters to my gate." Robb Stark rides forward, his silver-furred wolf Greywind pacing beside his horse, his father's steel resting cold against his shoulder. He does not wear his crown. He wears only a simple gorget and a cloak of black fur. Robb Stark says to Walder Frey with freezing clarity, "Open the gates, Lord Frey. I have 90,000 people behind me, and they do not have the patience for your tolls. Open the gates, or I will let the giants take your bridge apart." Walder Frey says to Robb Stark, spitting over the edge of the battlements, "You think your giants frighten me, boy? I have 4,000 men-at-arms in these towers. If you try to force your way, I will let the Lannisters know your plans, and your sisters will rot in the cells of King's Landing." Robb Stark says to Tormund Giantsbane, his gray eyes never leaving Walder Frey's face, "Tormund, let the giants have their bridge." Tormund Giantsbane lets out a thunderous, savage war cry, raising his bone-handled axe into the stormy sky. The 3 giants charge forward, their massive feet churning the red mud into a froth as they slam their weirwood trunks against the heavy oak gates of the northern tower. The sound is like the rolling of thunder, a deafening, splintering crash that shakes the ancient stone bridge to its foundations. The wood splinters, the massive iron bolts buckle, and with a final earth-shaking groan, the gates of the northern tower break apart. The wildling raiders surge through the breach, their obsidian axes and bronze daggers flashing in the torchlight as they overwhelm the terrified Frey sentries. Within minutes, the northern tower is taken, the blue and gray banners of House Frey ripped from the walls and cast into the rushing waters of the Green Fork. Walder Frey is dragged from his solar in chains, his ancient knees knocking together as he is forced to kneel before the young Stark king. Robb Stark says to Walder Frey, his voice colder than the river, "You wanted a marriage pact, Lord Frey. You wanted me to wed one of your daughters in exchange for your loyalty. But my wildlings do not understand your paper vows. Your bridge is mine now, and your men will march with my vanguard, or they will feed my wolf. Choose." Walder Frey looks at the massive giant standing behind Robb, his weirwood club dripping with the blood of his guard, and slowly, silently, bends his ancient head to the mud. The twins have fallen, and the gate to the south is wide open. The camps of the Westerland host under Sir Jaime Lannister burn bright along the grassy banks of the Red Fork, a sea of crimson tents that stretches for miles. Jaime stands in his glittering golden armor, his white Kingsguard cloak trailing on the rich, mirrorish carpets of his command pavilion, his handsome face tense with frustration. He is eager for glory, his fingers twitching on the hilt of his gilded sword, wanting to teach the young Wolf King of Winterfell a lesson in southern steel. But the night brings no peace to the Lannister camp. The storm clouds gather like a black shroud over the river, extinguishing the stars and plunging the valley into absolute darkness. In the deep shadows of the pine forest, Jon Snow stands beside Tormund Giantsbane, his Valyrian steel sword Longclaw reflecting the pale light of the campfires below. Around them, hundreds of wildling raiders crouch in the wet brush, their breathing synchronized with the wind, their obsidian axes silent and deadly. Jon Snow says to Tormund Giantsbane in a low, tense whisper, "The Lannister sentries are positioned every 20 paces along the perimeter. They have positioned their heavy cavalry in the center, near the riverbank. If we strike the horses first, they will panic and trample their own infantry." Tormund Giantsbane says to Jon Snow with a low, guttural grin, "Let the horses run, little crow. My giants are hungry, and they have not crushed a golden knight in 300 years. Give the signal. Let us see if their gold can stop a weirwood club." A single high-pitched hawk shriek pierces the night air, the skin changer's call. Suddenly, the darkness itself seems to scream. From the tree line, giants surge forward, their massive weirwood clubs swinging in devastating horizontal arcs that shatter steel plate, bone, and shield walls like dry kindling. They tear through the wooden palisades of the Lannister camp with a deafening, splintering crash, trampling sleeping soldiers, their thunderous roars echoing across the river. Jaime Lannister runs from his command tent, his white Kingsguard cloak trailing in the mud, his sword drawn as his green eyes widen in absolute, paralyzing terror. Jaime Lannister shouts to his fleeing guards, "What are those things? Form the line! Form the shield wall! They are only beasts." A 10-foot giant steps through the smoke, his mammoth skin cloak covered in mud, his massive weirwood club covered in the blood of Lannister knights. With a single, effortless swing, the giant crushes Jaime's guard, sending 3 heavy cavalrymen flying 20 paces into the rushing waters of the Red Fork. Robb Stark leads the northern heavy cavalry into the gap, his direwolf Greywind running beside his mount, a gray blur of fangs that tears the throats out of any Lannister officers who attempt to organize a retreat. Jaime Lannister sees the young king and charges through the chaos, his sword flashing in the lightning, determined to end the war in a single duel. Jaime Lannister says to Robb Stark with a wild, desperate laugh, "Come then, boy. Let us see if your wolf has any teeth without his giants." Robb Stark does not answer. He parries Jaime's strike, the impact of their swords sending sparks into the rain. Jaime is faster, his blade a blur of golden light, but Robb is stronger, fueled by the cold fury of his father's death. Greywind lunges from the shadows, biting Jaime's horse's leg. The beast buckles, throwing the Kingslayer into the red mud. Before Jaime can rise, Robb's boots are on his chest, the tip of his steel resting against Jaime's throat. Robb Stark says to Jaime Lannister, "Your father's gold could not save your army, Kingslayer, and it will not save your life. Bind him in chains." The battle is over, and the proud vanguard of Casterly Rock is completely shattered, their golden armor stained with the blood of a realm that has finally learned to stand with the wild. Inside the stone solar of Riverrun, the air is cold and heavy with the scent of burning pine. Catelyn Stark sits by the hearth, her hands trembling, as she watches her son Robb clean his sword before the ancient weirwood table. Across from them stands Mance Rayder, his fingers tracing the scars on his weathered face, his presence in the seat of House Tully an intolerable insult to her memories of honor. Catelyn Stark says to Robb Stark, her voice cracking with a mixture of raw grief and rising desperate anger, "Look at what you have become, Robb. The lords of the Riverlands are calling you the King of Savages. Your giants are stabling their mammoths in our temples, and your wildlings are plundering the fields of our own allies. Is this the justice you promised your father? To turn our home into a playground for beasts? Robb Stark says to Catelyn Stark, his gray eyes flat and cold as a winter pond. My father died because he believed in southern justice, Mother. He believed that the law would protect him. Tywin Lannister lost his best vanguard at the Red Fork, but he still has 15,000 Westermen digging in at Harrenhal, and he will raise 15,000 more from Casterly Rock if we give him the season to do it. If I do not use Mance's giants to break him now, the North will burn. I will use whatever weapon I have to bring my sisters home. Honor is a luxury we cannot afford. Mance Rayder says to Catelyn Stark, his voice soft, but carrying the weight of 1,000 winters. Your honor did not feed my people, Lady Catelyn. It did not stop the cold from taking our children beyond the wall. Your son gave us a future, and we will pay that debt in Lannister blood, whether you like the color of it or not. If we must be monsters to survive, then we will be monsters. The tension in the room is suffocating, and Catelyn Stark realizes that she has lost her son to the wild. She watches him leave the solar, his wolf gray wind following close behind, and she feels a dark, desperate determination take root in her chest. She cannot let the Stark name be permanently stained by this pagan madness. Under cover of a dark, rainy night, Catelyn Stark summons her most loyal servant, Sir Willis Woad, to her private chambers. Catelyn Stark says to Sir Willis Woad in a low, frantic whisper, "The king beyond the wall is a poison under our roof. As long as Mance Rayder lives, my son will never return to the path of honor. He will continue to lead these beasts until the Lannisters destroy us all. We must cut the head from the snake. Take this vial of sweet sleep and nightshade. Slip it into Mance's wine tonight before the war council. Once he is dead, the wildlings will scatter back to their forests, and my son will have no choice but to negotiate peaceful terms with Casterly Rock." Sir Willis Woad says to Jon Snow, who intercepts him in the corridor with ghosts snarling beside him, I have no choice, Lord Snow. The Lady Catelyn commanded it. She wishes to save her son's honor. Jon Snow says to Sir Willis Woad, his fingers tightening around the hilt of Longclaw, my father taught us that there is no honor in murder, and there is no honor in letting our people freeze. Drop the vial. But as Jon stops the poisoner, another shadow moves in the deep recess of the castle walls. Roose Bolton stands in the darkness, his pale eyes watching the exchange with a soft, unsettling approval. He realizes that the Stark coalition is on the verge of fracturing, and before the dawn breaks, he writes a secret letter to Tywin Lannister, offering to betray Robb Stark in exchange for the title of Warden of the North. He seals it, hands it to a raven he trusts, and watches the bird vanish south into the storm. Roose Bolton says to himself in a low, whispery chuckle, the young wolf has the strength of a giant, but he has his mother's soft heart. Let the Lannisters have their victory, and let the Dreadfort rule the winter. The raven flies fast, but the North's army marches faster, and Roose Bolton has no way of knowing which one will reach Harrenhal first. The twisted, half-melted towers of Harrenhal loom like the bones of a colossal dead giant above the black waters of the God's Eye. Inside the massive hall of the 100 Hearths, Tywin Lannister stands before his remaining lords, his golden armor covered in soot and road dust, his face cold, calm, and completely unreadable. He has retreated from the Riverlands, but he is not defeated. He has gathered his remaining 15,000 Westermen, dug deep trenches, and positioned heavy iron scorpions along the walls to repel the giants. He has also brought his own reserves of wildfire west from the capital, cast and hidden beneath the courtyard, a final insurance no one else in his host knows about. But the night brings a different kind of storm. From the dark, misty shores of the lake, the allied host of the Wolf and the Wild launches a coordinated, silent assault. Howland Reed's Crannogmen slip through the muddy marshes, their reed pipes silent as they blow poisoned darts into the Lannister sentries. At the same time, Robb Stark leads 5,000 northern infantry through the ruined eastern gate, while Mance Rayder's giants attack from the west. Riding with the vanguard quietly and without banners are 200 Dornish spears, sent north in secret by Prince Doran Martell the moment word reached Sunspear that the wolves marched to settle an old debt with the house that murdered Elia and her children. Dorne does not forgive. Dorne simply waits for someone else to start the fire. Tywin Lannister stands on the battlements, his green eyes narrowing as he hears the sudden, thunderous war cry of the giants below. Tywin Lannister says to his commanders with cold, mechanical precision, "Aim the scorpions at the mammoths! I want those beasts brought down before they reach the courtyard. Let them find out that our steel is harder than their hide." But before the scorpions can fire, a flock of 1,000 ravens descends from the stormy sky, their black wings blotting out the moonlight as they peck at the eyes of the Lannister archers. Under the cover of this skin-changer storm, the giants slam their weirwood trunks against the heavy oak gates of Harrenhal's inner keep. The wood splinters, the massive stone archways crack, and the gates are torn from their stone hinges. Robb Stark charges through the breach, his sword flashing in the emerald glow of the wildfire reservoir Tywin had hidden as a final trap. He cuts down 3 Lannister guards, his movements quick, silent, and deadly as a shadow cat. Beside him, Jon Snow and Ghost fight in perfect bloody synchronization, their blade and fangs tearing through the Westerland ranks. Tormund Giantsbane reaches the high tower, his bone-handled axe splitting the skull of Sir Amory Lorch, the very knight who, years before, had crawled beneath Prince Rhaegar's bed at the sack of King's Landing and put a dagger through his infant daughter Rhaenys. It is not northern justice, but it is justice all the same, and the Dornish spears at Tormund's back roar their approval. Tywin Lannister is cornered in the central courtyard, surrounded by a wall of northern spears and Dornish steel. He stands proud and magnificent to the last, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his eyes fixed on the young Stark king. Robb Stark says to Tywin Lannister, "You ordered the sack of King's Landing. You raised the swords that burned half the Riverlands. You raised the boy who put my father's head on a spike. Now your legacy is nothing but ash and bone." Tywin Lannister says to Robb Stark with cold, defiant pride, "A name built on fear is like a fortress of stone, Stark. You may kill me, but your savages will tear your own kingdom apart. You will rule over a graveyard of snow. And tell me, boy, when you finally reach the capital, ask my grandson to show you his sword. Ask him where the steel came from. Your father left more behind him than a promise. He left good Valyrian steel, and Valyrian steel does not go to waste in my house." Robb's jaw tightens, a cold dread cutting through the fury in his chest, but there is no time to ask what the old lion means. Robb Stark says to Tywin Lannister, "I will rule over a free north. Rickard Karstark, take his head." Rickard Karstark raises his massive broadsword and decapitates Tywin Lannister, the old lion's golden helm rolling into the red mud of Harrenhal's courtyard. The lion has been completely defanged, and the path to the capital is clear. 3 days later, a single raven finds its way to a smoking, ruined castle by the God's Eye, and, finding no one left alive to read its message, circles twice over the black water and flies on. Somewhere in the marching column south of Harrenhal, Roose Bolton waits for a reply that will never come, and slowly understands that his letter arrived to a dead man's hall. He burns the copy over a candle in his own tent, says nothing to anyone, and begins, patiently, to wait for a better night. The golden domes and red stone towers of King's Landing rise from the morning fog, a glittering, opulent monument to 300 years of Targaryen and Baratheon rule. But the city is silent, caught in a suffocating, terrified silence that rattles the bones of the gold cloaks standing atop the mudgate. Outside the walls, the fields of the Crownlands are a black, scorched waste of mud and bone. 20,000 free folk warriors stand in a colossal circular formation that surrounds the capital from the King's Road to the shores of the Blackwater. The vast, slower tide of their people still spreading across the Gift far to the north, already building the first halls of a home that did not exist a season ago. At the front of the host stand 3 woolly mammoths, their curved tusks covered in heavy, rusted steel plates, their giant trainers standing beside them with massive weirwood clubs. Behind them come the giants, their massive frames draped in thick mammoth furs and iron mail scavenged from dead Lannister knights. The wind howls off the bay, carrying the scent of salt blood and the freezing, supernatural chill of the deep north. Atop the high battlements of the Red Keep, 13-year-old King Joffrey Baratheon stands in his glittering golden armor, his face pale with a mixture of childish arrogance and rising, frantic terror. At his hip hangs a new blade, barely a year forged, its rippled Valyrian steel catching the gray morning light. Beside him stands Sandor Clegane, his burned face grim and unreadable as he looks down at the massive host of monsters below. Joffrey Baratheon says to Sandor Clegane, his voice cracking with a high-pitched, desperate shriek, "Let them come! We have stone walls! We have the royal fleet! My grandfather Tywin will arrive with 30,000 men and crush these savages into the mud. Fire the catapults! Burn them!" Sandor Clegane says to Joffrey Baratheon in a low, gravelly whisper. "Your grandfather is dead, Joffrey. His head is rolling around in the mud at Harrenhal, if the ravens can be trusted, and I'd wager they can. And that pretty sword on your hip won't keep those wooden gates from splintering when those beasts start running. Look at the vanguard. They aren't holding banners, they're holding heads." Down on the muddy field, Robb Stark sits astride his warhorse, his gray cloak whipping in the freezing wind, his direwolf Greywind growling low at his side. He raises his hand, his fingers clenching the hilt of his father's steel, and Jon Snow rides up beside him with a grim, silent understanding passing between the two brothers. They both heard what Tywin said at Harrenhal. Neither of them has said the words aloud yet. Beside them, Mance Rayder raises a massive silver-tipped warhorn, the Horn of Winter. Robb Stark says to Mance Rayder, his gray eyes fixed on the mudgate, "Give the signal, Mance. Let them hear the voice of the true North." Mance Rayder blows the horn. A low, deep, unholy note rumbles across the field, a sound so loud and terrible that the stone walls of King's Landing seem to shake to their very foundations. Suddenly, 3 giants let out guttural, thunderous war cries, their massive clubs striking the ground in perfect, rhythmic unison. The 3 steel-clad mammoths surge forward, their massive hooves churning the mud into a red froth as they charge toward the mudgate at a terrifying, ground-shaking gallop. Behind the mammoths, the Wildling raiders surge forward, their bronze spears and obsidian axes flashing in the pale morning light as they raise a chorus of thousands of voices. On pikes at the vanguard, they lift the severed, pale head of Tywin Lannister, its sight sending a wave of absolute, paralyzing panic through the defenders on the walls. The mammoths collide with the bronze-clad doors of the mudgate with an earth-shaking, deafening crash. The wood splinters, the iron hinges buckle, and with a final roaring crash, the gate falls. The wild tide of furs, bone, and northern steel pours into the capital, a storm of iron and ice sweeping toward the Red Keep. Robb Stark and Jon Snow ride through the burning streets side by side, Greywind and Ghost clearing a path of torn gold cloaks before them. They find the Red Keep's outer gates already breached by the giants, the Kingsguard scattered or fallen, and they climb the steps of Maegor's Holdfast with the direwolves at their heels. They find Joffrey Baratheon alone in the throne room, beneath the jagged shadow of the Iron Throne, his golden crown askew, his new sword shaking in his hand. Sandor Clegane is nowhere to be seen. The Hound, by all northern accounts afterward, simply walked out through a side door in the chaos and vanished from every history that follows. Joffrey Baratheon says to Robb Stark, his voice cracking between a snarl and a sob, "Stay back! I am your king. One word from me, and every man left in this city will cut you down." Robb Stark says to Joffrey Baratheon, his voice utterly without mercy, "There is no one left to give the order to, Joffrey. There is only the debt. You put my father's head on a spike for a crowd to laugh at. Show me his blade. I know it is there. I can see the ripples in the steel from here." Joffrey's hand trembles on the hilt at his belt, and when Robb tears the sword free, he goes very still. The blade is shorter than a greatsword, cruelly narrow, clearly reforged from something larger, and along the fold of the steel runs the unmistakable watered pattern of Valyrian metal. The same pattern that once ran the length of ice. Robb Stark, staring at the last surviving piece of his father's sword, shrunk down into a boy king's toy, understands exactly what Tywin Lannister's dying riddle meant, and something in his gray eyes goes as cold and final as the wall itself. Robb Stark says to Joffrey Baratheon in a voice like a closing door, "They melted my father's honor down to fit your hand. I will not return the favor." Jon, Ghost. He does not raise his own sword. He does not need to. What happens next in the throne room of King's Landing is not recorded in any Southern history, because no Southern maester survives that night to write it. And the Northern lords who do remember do not speak of it kindly, even to their own children. Sansa Stark is found alive an hour later, locked in a chamber above Maegor's Holdfast, guarded by 2 gold cloaks who surrender the moment they see Grey Wind's teeth. Arya is not found in any cell at all. She is found 3 streets away, filthy and half-starved and armed with a kitchen knife, having survived the sack of her own city alone since the day their father died. And she puts that knife to Jon Snow's throat for a full 3 seconds, before she recognizes his face and starts, for the first time in a year, to cry. The screen fades to black under the roaring triumph of giants and the howling of wolves. In the wreckage of the throne room, as Northern lords and free folk chieftains alike begin the long, uneasy work of deciding what a kingdom ruled by both ice and wildness will even look like, a single rider arrives from the north, half dead with exhaustion, his horse foundering beneath him. He is one of the last Black brothers left breathing at Castle Black, and he has ridden the length of the King's Road without stopping to deliver a message that no one in the South wanted to hear before the war was won, and that everyone will have to hear now that it is. The Night's Watch rider says to Robb Stark, collapsing to his knees in the ash of the throne room, "Your Grace, forgive me. There are only 40 of us left standing the wall, and the Rangers who went out past the Frostfangs did not come back. Something moved in the dark 2 nights after your army passed through the gate. We heard it in the wind, in the way the ravens stopped flying north. The wall held for 8,000 years because there was always a watch behind it and a host of free folk fighting the true enemy in front of it. Your Grace."
We emptied both.
Robb Stark looks north through the smoke of the city he has just conquered, past the ashes of House Lannister, past the crown he never wanted to win this way, toward a horizon he cannot see from here and did not spare a single thought for in the whole long war behind him. He has broken the Lannisters. He has brought his sisters home. He has given 90,000 people a future. And somewhere far behind him, in the white silence beyond an undefended wall, the true war, the only one that ever mattered, has already begun without him. That is our theory. But we leave you with the questions that will haunt this timeline until the next chapter. Robb Stark won the War of the 5 Kings before it could even claim 5 kings. But he did it by emptying the one wall that held back the end of the world. Can a king in the north, fresh off a southern conquest, turn his exhausted army around fast enough to matter? What horror finally answers when the wall's silence breaks? And now that Sandor Clegane has vanished into the chaos of a burning capital, and a Valyrian blade forged from a dead man's honor lies bloody on the floor of a throne room, whose hands will it end up in next? Drop your theories in the comments below. We read every single one, and the best ones shape our next episode. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Westeros Rewritten. Until then, remember, the night is dark and the winter is